It's giving. Wemily. Hey friends, welcome back to Crows Before Bros. My name is Lauren, and you may have noticed that I did not have a January solo video. I've had a nutty few months. We got really sick in December, and I ended up pretty much having to shift Christmas into January in all areas of my life. I moonlight as a music teacher, so I had to move my student recital into January, and I just like rode the Christmas train all the way through January. My intention was to do a Christmas in January video as well, and all of a sudden it's February. So I missed the boat, but I do want to do like a quick little appetizer section of this video to tell you about a few Christmas reads that I loved this year. If you're full Grinch, feel free to skip to the next section of this video. I'll make sure to put a little tab down at the bottom so that you can jump ahead if you're just interested in hearing about the book we're talking about today, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. In the meantime, a Christmas appetizer time. Appetizer? What am I, 40? Okay. The first Christmas read that I really loved this year was Catherine Swift's Mistletoe Messes and Peppermint Kisses. We love Catherine over here, and we love supporting indie authors. This Christmas read is about a girl who does a favor for her gay best friend. She ends up tagging along with him for a couple of family holidays. She goes and visits with his family, pretending to be his girlfriend for Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. It is a juicy fake dating trope. It's got really tastefully done, but fiery smut scenes. And it's got found family vibes, and honestly, of all the books that I've read with good and bad representation, I found this to be such a nice coming out story. The Pruitt family is so loving and supportive, and Catherine really leaned into a lot of like really homey Christmas vibes. It's just such a feel-good book, and it's written so well. I think that Catherine's biggest strength is her characterization. The characters feel like very human and real, likable and relatable. I loved it. This was 5 stars, 5 candy canes, I guess, for me, for sure. I loved this book. And then secondly, I also really liked Just Like Magic by Sarah Hogle. Not quite as much, but this book was very cute. Let me tell you about it. The concept of this book is honestly so whack. We follow our main character, who is like a classic spoiled brat influencer type, as she accidentally summons the holiday spirit using her record player. It's wild. I usually don't really like the kind of bratty LA girl trope. I always find it really unrealistic how the main character goes from being just like the scum of the earth to like an angel human being with all these altruistic like tendencies in such a short, unrealistic period of time. But I found that this book did a really good job at that. I think some of the magical realism elements like really helped the trope along. It gives Will Ferrell in Elf vibes, and I can't say I have a whole lot of experience with a love story between a human person and like, I mean, he's embodied physically, but he's like an essence. But this book was pretty cute. I did find myself lagging like a bit in some parts. I think some of the humor was a bit forced, especially in some of the family dynamics. There are so many children that are like nieces and nephews, and I think the author maybe like overdid it, trying to lean into like being funny with all kinds of strange names and stuff. Overall though, it was really cute. I would give this a read. I would give this 4 candy canes. Okay, let's get down to business. Today we're talking about Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. This book clocks in at 317 pages, and it's characterized as a cozy fantasy, ? I've seen quite a few videos and TikToks that put this in the same kind of category as Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, which I love. So I naturally went out to the bookstore pretty much right when it was released in mid-January. I've been really trying to lean into books lately that feel safe, feel easy, feel cozy, are not too triggering, feel low stakes. I'll elaborate on this in a little bit, but I definitely would not shelf this book as a cozy fantasy. It takes place in 1909, so you could maybe argue that it's a bit of a historical fiction with magical elements, leaning into a lot of fairy lore. Yeah. So plot-wise, we follow Emily Wilde. She's like an awkward scholar from Cambridge as she travels to this small village in Norway to collect data for her encyclopedia on fairy lore. She's accompanied by her sweet, scraggly dog and, surprisingly, another tag-along companion in her academic rival, Wendell Bambleby. It almost borders on a little bit of a sunshine grumpy trope. Wendell Bambleby is very like slated to be a player in the first kind of section of the book, and he's very boisterous and sociable. He gets along with everybody in the town right away. And Emily is very cold and clinical. She's really blunt in her delivery of everything, which I think is probably par for like science types, scientists, scholars. I just found her hard to relate to. She was pretty cold throughout. Wendell kind of follows Emily around and helps her out with some of her discovery, some of her field research, and he also spends a lot of time kind of cozying up their shared living space. Together, Wendell and Emily help out the village as people are seemingly being taken from the village to the fairy realm. We see a child that's been switched out with a changeling and a couple that's been taken to the fairy realm as well. So there is definitely some adventure in this book for sure. I'm going to smatter in some spoilers here in the middle, so if you are wanting to read this book with some surprises and you're not wanting me to spoil any of the major plot points for you, I would pause the video here, come back later, or if you want to skip to the next section, I will make sure to pop some markers down below. So pretty soon in this novel, Emily suspects that Wendell might be a fairy, and she's right. Wendell is a fairy prince, king. Wendell is the heir to the throne in his faction of the Fae realm. And the queen that is currently on the throne is wanting to have Wendell killed, and so he has come to the human world to hide out, basically. We see a lot of adventure unfold in the surrounding village, with the attempt to barter with fairies to try to get people back. And soon we find out that Emily's been cursed, enchanted, question mark. Emily, the stubborn character that she is, often goes out into the field to do research without her companion Wendell, and it ends up getting her into a lot of trouble. She more or less animates a winter fairy king into a snowman? Did I dream this? And because she's freed him, this winter king insists that he marries her, which is crazy because in the story shortly before, Wendell has proposed out of the blue. I wouldn't call Wendell and Emily's romance a slow burn even. It's more like a snail plodding along on the sidewalk for like 12 to 15 years and then bursting into flames. The back third of the book is mostly Emily being captive in the fairy realm and Wendell and the villagers joining forces to plot to go and save her. Time gets pretty wibbly wobbly as Emily is obviously enchanted or under some type of like fae spell, and we see Wendell and the village people, the people of the village, come to poison the Winter King, and Emily has this moment of mercy at the end where she decides that she can't go through with it. So the king ends up surviving, but there is a little bit of pandemonium at the end. Ultimately, they do escape and they get back to the human realm. Wendell and Emily find their way back to Cambridge at the end of the book. It does look like there is a sequel coming, so stay tuned for that. So, my thoughts on this book. The thing that I really liked about this book was the setting. It was such a beautiful scene in this village in Norway, and the author did a really good job of using great descriptive imagery to paint a picture and set a scene for us. I also felt a bit mesmerized by the fairies. The first really obvious fairy encounter that we have is with this little wiry, kind of creepy thing named Poe. Poe and Emily do some gentle bartering. He ends up giving her some kind of like sulfur smelling bread, and he's got these like long, freaky little fingers. But it's cute. Imagine salad fingers, but like a house pet. This is pretty much where my likes list ends though. I didn't love our main character. This book doesn't really read like a YA fantasy, so I was surprised to find that there is a lot of that I'm not like other girls trope. It seemed unnecessary. I can't even tell you how many times Emily is like, oh, there's so many loose hairs falling out of my messy bun. I'm so different than other girls. Like, why? We're already establishing that she's an intellectual. I just don't know why some of these elements were even like added, and so repetitively. She is very, like I said, clinical and cold in her delivery. So I just found her like really hard to relate to, hard to read, boring to read, dry to read. Also for their romance, I just found it very, very tepid. There was not a lot happening, and then suddenly Wendell is proposing to her after very, very little. Like, we as the reader are given not a lot to work with. There's like maybe like a little bit of he fell first, but it just happens so immediately that it's shocking. You guys know, I want to yearn, you know? I want there to be some kind of build up. I'm okay with it being like little spoons given to me every now and again, but I like didn't feel like there was much of anything throughout this book. I found a lot of the book really sleepy. For all that happens, the pace felt like glacially slow, and I had a hard time finding excitement in their romance, in the development of her encyclopedia, encyclopedia. It was just slow. Its pacing is maybe why it's being categorized as a cozy fantasy in a lot of social media spaces, which leads me to my biggest issue with this book. This might be more a book culture thing and not specifically this book, because my expectations didn't align with how I read it. But there are loads of really, really graphic combat moments in this book. Let me read you one. The bows darted out, and he skewered the faeries on them. Once they were all immobilized, held squirming and screaming above the ground, he moved from one to the other, tearing them apart with perfect calm brutality. Limbs, hearts, and other organs I did not recognize scattered the snow. He did not rush, but killed them methodically while the others howled and writhed. Yeah, cozy for sure. This reminds me a lot of when I first told my husband that I found the Lord of the Rings movies to be peaceful. I was obviously thinking about like Rivendell and the general vibes of the books rather than like the gruesome battle scenes. He was like, yes, peaceful. This is not a cozy fantasy. I cannot stress this enough. Or maybe we as a book community need to redefine what a cozy fantasy actually is. This is why I gave this book like a mid-tier rating, even though I didn't super love it. I have to remember and kind of reconcile a little bit that I went into this book with a very different expectation than the book that I actually read. It might be a case of this just not being the right book for this reader, and I may be clouded by my desire to read something that feels safer and lower stakes. I'm looking for something I think that is more character driven rather than like traumatic battle driven. I adore Legends and Lattes, as you guys know, and I don't think that they're close enough in vibes to even be compared. I would give Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia for Faeries 3 stars, and I would say that if you go in with the expectation that it's not gonna feel like a warm hug, you might actually really like it. If you're interested in fairy lore and you like a slower paced book, this might be for you. It just didn't quite hit the spot for me, unfortunately. As a footnote, I have read some reviews that there is some frustrating cultural inconsistency in some of the language used in this book, so keep that in mind. I didn't dig too much into it, but something to consider if you're picking this book up. Anyway, do you have any cozy fantasy recommendations? And furthermore, what would you consider to be a cozy fantasy? How would you define it? I need to metric this properly in my mind. Comment below, and if you liked this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We're so happy to have you here. We try to put out new videos a couple times a month at least. We love talking books, so we're happy to have you connect with us here and on social media. And yeah, that's it for me. So I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!